Okay, we are on Kafchet Amud Bet. If you're following in the art scroll, we're on 28b1. Okay, let's begin. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Asi, Bate Knesiot beBavel, the Bate Knesset in Bavel, 1 second, no, Megilla. So we are on Kafchet Amud Aleph at the bottom, right at the bottom. If you're following in the art scroll, we're on page 28A4. Tanu Rabbanan, Bate Knesiot en nohagim behen kalut rosh. So we learned in the Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda gave a list of things, a litany of things that you cannot do in a Bet Knesset, okay? And we'll get back to those things in the Gemara. And what was the reason? Not only that, we said even in a Bet Knesset, which is destroyed, still it maintains its kedusha. And we brought a proof because it says that v'hashimoti et mikdashchem, and I will make the mikdash desolate. I'll destroy it. So you see, even in destruction, it's called a mikdash. Kedushata na, they are still in the kedusha. Afkishen shomimim. So the Gemara said then, but when it's destroyed, so we would allow for the growth of grass because we want people to feel terrible about it. We want them to recognize that they need to pray, that they need to ask Hashem to bring that Bet Knesset back. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, Bate Knesiot en nohagim behen kalut rosh. You have a Bet Knesset, you're not allowed to deal with that place with a light head. Doesn't mean lightheaded like you're going to faint. It means that you're not dealing with it as if it's a heavy subject matter. So it's light. It's it's chafif. You talk about whatever you want to talk about. There's no respect. And ochlim bahem. You're also not allowed to eat and you're not allowed to drink in them. And shotim bahem. All for the same reason because you can't deal with it in kalut rosh with a light approach. Ve'en neotin bahem. You're not allowed to make yourself beautiful in the Bet Knesset. So as an example, let's say you wanted to come to the Bet Knesset and brush your hair, or you wanted to come to the Bet Knesset and put on lipstick, or I don't know what you're doing, but the halacha would be you're not allowed to do so. You would not go for a walk or turn it into a tourist attraction. You don't walk in on a hot day because of the heat, in other words, to escape the heat, and you don't walk in on a rainy day to escape from the rain. And you cannot do in a Bet Knesset a hesped, a eulogy on a day of a funeral of a yachid, of a individual. Now, what are we talking about over here? You're talking about, is yachid mean as opposed to a mass casualty when a lot of people die? No. Yachid over here means where the funeral is a yachid. There's individual people that are attending it. It's not a funeral of a great tzaddik where the whole community has to go out. If you remember in Masechet Tanit, we learned that when a Talmid Chacham goes out, so the whole town is supposed to go and follow out and walk out with him and show him the kavod. So therefore, that's called a hesped of Rabim. Aval korim bahem, but if it's a Bet Knesset, you're allowed to read Torah in the Bet Knesset. In other words, not only pray. Vishonim bahem, and you're allowed to learn Mishnah. Umaspidim bahen hesped shel Rabim. You're allowed to learn a hesped to say a hesped, the eulogy of a person who has a large gathering of people coming to their funeral, i.e. a Talmid Chacham. Now, just to be clear, the heter is not you're allowed to give a eulogy at a packed funeral. It's not about the fact that it's many versus small. Like if, let's say, as an example, you had some Jew, not religious guy, nice guy, everybody loves him. 1,000 people come to the funeral. Would you be allowed to? Because then it's a funeral of a Rabbim? No, still not. Right? It's a euphemism for the funeral of a Talmid Chacham. It's by calling it Hesped Shel Rabbim. But only a Hesped of a Talmid Chacham because that is kavod for the Torah. Okay?
Who's the judge of that? That could cause issues, no?
What do you mean?
Who determines if he's a Talmid Chacham or not?
That is a very interesting question, by the way. Interesting question. We have examples as what a Talmid Chacham is called in the Shulchan Aruch and in Rambam. Rambam says this is what's called a Talmid Chacham. Shulchan Aruch says this is what's called Talmid Chacham. So we have parameters for what constitutes Talmid Chacham. I don't know how strict we necessarily are with those parameters. So in other words, let's say you have a rabbi versus a rabbi's rabbi, or rabbis versus a rabbi's rabbi. So in other words, the type of person who's teaching rabbis who are teaching other rabbis. Like, how big does the guy need to be in order to be Talmid Chacham? I think the scenario is when there's a lot of people who are coming out for the funeral of a rabbi, then they're coming out because he's a rabbi, not because he was the varsity, power forward. Okay, so that would be kavod for the Torah, and therefore it's mutar in the Beit Knesset. It's not considered kalut rosh to have that funeral there. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Ematai, when, now this is strange Ematai because we don't know what it's talking about. Ematai, when did we say whatever he's going on, Bishuvan, when the Beit Knesset is still people living in it, praying in it, using it. Once it's destroyed, you leave it, and if grass grows, you don't pull it out in order that the people should be struck by the desolation and devastation, and then they'll pray that the Beit Knesset should be restored to its original place. Now the Gemara is trying to figure out, what was Rabbi Yehuda rolling off of when he said, when did we say that? What's he talking about? Because the piece before that is not talking about grass. Asavim man shmayu. Who mentioned grass? That Rabbi Yehuda is like, listen, the only time we make this grass-related, decision, i.e. cutting the grass, is when you have to cut the grass. You can't let the grass grow when it's occupied. When it's not occupied, Beit Knesset, then you let the grass grow. The Tanakama, the Mishnah leading up to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, doesn't say anything for Rabbi Yehuda to challenge it and say, when did we say that only here? So what is it referring to? The Gemara adds in a little bit. The Gemara adds in Chesura Mechsera Ve'achi Katani. No, there's like a piece missing from the Braita, and this is what the Braita is trying to say. Umechabdinotan, you clean it or you sweep the Bet Knesset. Umarbitzinotam, that doesn't mean you hit it. Marbitzin means that they would pour water on the dust floors. What would be the point? So in a dusty room that's dry, the dust rises it's in the air. But when they would spray the ground or throw water around on the ground, it would keep the dust into like mud, and it would stay on the floor, so the Beit Knesset would be, so to speak, cleaner for air. So the Gemara says, if you were to do that, if you were to sweep the Beit Knesset and make sure that you're pouring the water on it, that halacha kideh shelo yalu behen asarim. That the purpose of that is in order that it shouldn't grow. You're disturbing what's going on the ground. You're not just letting it lie, leaving it alone. Then when is that? That's when the Beit Knesset is being used. So you have to make sure that everything is held in an optimal scenario. The dust, the sweeping of the floor, etc., etc. And the sweeping would also obviously get rid of any grass that was starting to grow. However, that's when it's settled. In order they should not have grass growing on them. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, now rolling off of a introductory sentence which jives with what we were talking about before. You can't use it in an inappropriate way. It's not supposed to be respected. Don't do this, don't do that. And make sure that it's nice and clean, except for when, says Rabbi Yehuda, when did we say that? In a used shul. In a non-used shul, Yalu bahem misavi kidei shelo, Yalu misavi. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Matai b'yishuvan, Ava b'chubanan, manichin oto la'alot, we allow the grass to grow. Alu bahem asavim lo yitlosh. If the grass grew, you should not pull it out. Now, we've already had our rant on the concept of chesure mechsa ve'achi katani. You have a Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't seem to make sense. So what do? You added your own words. Where'd you get those words from? So in a scenario where someone else remembered the Mishnah in its full text, fine, then that's the answer. That's a chesure mechsa. But sometimes the words of the Mishnah itself, they give rise to the Chesure Mechsera Ve'achi Katani. And where do we see this idea? If you take a look closely, you'll notice in the language of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah and Rabbi Yehuda over here in this Braita are a little bit different. Let's turn back one page to the Mishnah. What does Rabbi Yehuda say at the end of the Mishnah? Alu bo asavim, if grass grows, lo yitlosh, don't pull it out. so that it should awake and evoke that feeling of desolation and upset in the people. Now let's look at the Braita. It doesn't say if they grew, leave them alone. What does it say? It says an extra sentence. Rabbi Yehuda says, when did we say this? When they're settled. But when they're destroyed, manichin otan la'alot, we let them grow. Alu behem asavim, and if it grew, right, lo yitlosh, you don't pull it out. Is that clear? So there's an extra bit here that Rabbi Yehuda is adding in the Braita that is not in the Mishnah. He doesn't only say if the grass grows, let it grow. Like don't rip it out. He says we allow the grass to grow, and if it grows, we don't pull it out. Indicating that what was said before, we allow the grass to grow, is something which does not create an allowance for grass to grow. That's how the Gemara understood that prior to what he was saying. He says when it's destroyed, we allow it to grow, indicating that when it's not destroyed, not only do we not pull it out, but we don't allow it to grow in the first place. We make sure that we're stripping the floors, we're washing, cleaning, sweeping, but we're not leaving it abandoned.
Letting it go part is a natural process. It's going to grow anyway.
Exactly. So why did you need the first part?
Exactly.
In other words, the Mishnah is almost telling you, don't leave it. So what were we rolling off of? Right? Well, sorry, leave it. What are we rolling off of? Not leaving it. Right. And that's how the Mishnah understood, the Gemara understood, that the Braita was saying something else that Rabbi Yehuda was responding to. Okay? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Asi says, the synagogues in Bavel, al tenaihen asuyin, are made with a condition, a precondition. So what do we just see? We just saw in a synagogue, you can't eat, you can't drink, you go for a walk, you can't come inside if it's hot, you can't come inside if it's cold, or all these laws. Rav Asi comes along and says, well, when we built synagogues in Bavel, we built them with the condition from the beginning. We said, these synagogues, we're sanctifying them, but we want them to be allowed to be used for all these other things as well. Okay? And still, still, you're not allowed to act with kalut rosh, with lightheaded, with making it inappropriate. Now, it's just interesting because the commentators are trying to figure out what is Rav Asi saying. Is Rav Asi saying that in Bavel you'd be allowed to do all these things in a synagogue? What is he saying? Or is he referring to a scenario where the Bet Knesset was already destroyed? Now, let me just give you the difference between. Rav Asi said, in Bavel, we made this condition. Why? Because the synagogues in Bavel, if you abandon that synagogue, and you never come back to that synagogue, it just stays as is in Bavel forever. But the synagogues in Israel that we know we're going to return to when the time of Mashiach comes, even if you abandon that synagogue, there's a holiness to the synagogue because of its future. So there's an opinion that says that you could only make this condition on a synagogue not in Israel. But on a synagogue in Israel, it would never even work, the conditions. You'd always have these problems of the Mishnah and the Braita of how you would behave in the Beit Knesset, even if you made a condition. So the Gemara says, okay, so what does it mean that you're not allowed to act in a way of kalut rosh? It says the Rav Asi cheshbonot. You're not allowed to make calculations. You can't sit down and add up sums of money. This is going to cost this, the budget for this, etc., etc. Machloket, what are we talking about over here? One opinion says that we're talking about your own personal cheshbonot, business, numbers. You're running the numbers on a market fund, on a Bitcoin, whatever. Unrelated to synagogue. That's one opinion. Other opinion says no, that's not a problem. The problem is more communal cheshbonot. Why? Because those numbers are related to everybody. So since they relate to the community, people will find out that people will know, oh, they're running the numbers now for next year's budget in the Beit Knesset. So it brings an even more of attention to the fact the synagogue is being used like as if it's like an office. Okay, so therefore that is the second opinion as to where you're not allowed to make these calculations in the Beit Knesset. Amar Rav Asi.
Can we go back?
Yeah.
He said the en ochlim ve'en shotin.
Yeah.
Should we? How do we interpret that?
So again,
we obviously eat and drink in shul.
So again, remember, that's exactly what we said earlier. We said an opinion that in Bavel they made a Tanai that that the Bet Knesset was able to be used for other things. So drinking or eating is not necessarily a level of Kalut Rosh. According to one opinion in that Gemara, what it's trying to say is that you'd be able to build in a Tanaya condition that would allow you to have those things. But we're only in Bavel, not in Israel. Israel is a higher level of Kedusha for the Bet Knesset. That's what one opinion would be. The other opinion would be, no, that even in Chutz La'aretz, you still can't make a Tanai, and that would still be a problem in a Bet Knesset. And the only time that the Tanai would help you is after it's already destroyed, where we said that you still can't treat it in a not nice way. So there the condition helped for when it was destroyed, but not for when it was in use. So it would depend, the halakha would depend on how you're understanding what Rav Asi was adding over here when he talks about this condition, okay? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Asi, Bet Knesset, this is wild. Shemechashbin bo cheshbonot, a Bet Knesset where you start running numbers, you're tallying, numbers in the Bet Knesset. In the end, malinim bo et hamet, you wind up using that Bet Knesset for dead bodies, which is quite intense.
How do you connect?
Quite intense. Also, what's the connection between those two statements? Says the Gemara, Melinin salka daitach. Do you think it means that everyone's going to die? There's going to be dead people in the shul because they make cheshbonot? Is that how far it's going to go? Lo sagi de la vachi. It's not enough without that. The Gemara answers, Ela. No, it means lesof sheyalinu bomet mitzvah. It doesn't mean that people are going to die for the sin of doing calculation in the shul. What it means is that in the city, if there'll be people that don't have someone to bury them, so they're not going to have a house or a place or a funeral home or whatever, so who's going to be responsible to bury that person who no one has a responsibility? This responsibility belongs to the town, to the people of the town. So where would they put this body without having anywhere to put it? It would go to the Bet Knesset. By the way, if you remember, we talked about a synagogue already a little while ago that was 3 different rooms, right? And the main lobby, they were using it for dead bodies, remember? And on one side was a morgue, and on one side was a synagogue, and Rava told them to move the aron to the doorway. Yeah. So you see that there are times that they're using the synagogue for a purpose like that. So the Gemara is saying, look, you see, if a person is acting with cheshbonot, what's going to happen? A dead guy, not from this town, will pass away in the town. They'll have to stick the dead body in the Beit Knesset. And what is that for? Because of the disrespect that they have for the Beit Knesset. You turned it into a place where it's not holy. Okay, so we'll make it into a usage where it's not holy. Another approach perhaps is a wider question, I must say. It's a much wider question. What's the wider question to me is what's the direct correlation between melinim bomet and doing cheshbonot, right? Why is it that that of all things it should say, you know what's going to happen? They're going to have to turn it into a zoo. There's other things which are degrading, which are not like midah keneged midah. So one of the things that I found, which I thought was quite interesting, one of the things I found when I was considering this, is that there's a very special language for tefillah. It says, Lechuna v'nivakecha, bo cheshbon. It's pasuk. And it says that God says to the people, come, let's make a reckoning between me and you. You know, if your sins are like this, are red like, dyed wool, they're eventually going to become white. If your sins are like this, so basically there's this, back and forth, and what we're saying is that this is how it's going to be. This is how it's going to be improved. And where is that statement referring to? It's referring to the process of tefillah. That God makes a cheshbon with a person on their sins, on their merits, and what they deserve, what they don't deserve. And the outcome of that is that the person winds up with life on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's where the pasuk is mentioned in our prayers. If you take the Bet Knesset, which was designed for that cheshbon, and you use it for other cheshbonot, then what happens? This is the cheshbon you want. Hashem says, okay, so the other cheshbon is now off the table. Now already you brought the cheshbon that could have saved death from a person from a town, and you nullified it from the Beit Knesset. There's a famous sign that says, if you come here to talk, where will you go to pray? Right? In other words, if you came here to make your cheshbonot, Where are you going to go to make the cheshbono shel olam, the cheshbon of the whole world, of where a person, reckons with their sins with Hakadosh Baruch Hu and walks out, being given life. That's the Beit Knesset, and maybe that's why this idea is brought home. The Gemara continues: you can't make yourself beautiful in the Beit Knesset. Amar Rava says, Chachamim v'talmidehem mutarin. But if you have a Talmid Chacham or young studying Torah scholars, they are allowed to. The Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, "My Berabanan." We call Bet Midrash Berabanan. What does Berabanan mean? Gemara means it's short for Beta Derabanan. This is their home. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about a Talmid Chacham who lives, eats, does everything in the Beit Knesset because that's where he learns. But let's say, as an example, you have a random Talmid Chacham from another town comes to this Beit Knesset. Is he allowed to fix his hair on the way to a wedding, get dressed, whatever, and the way? No, of course not. It's just that if this is your home, because you're here every day, all day, so we're not going to make you go home and waste more of your Torah learning time in order to be able to protect the synagogue from that disrespect. Because we say instead, the respect of the synagogue and the Beit Knesset is that the Talmid Chacham lives here, and this has become his home. And look, the same way, a regular person in their home, this is how they behave, so Talmid Chacham is going to behave that way in this place, which is his place of residence. But that does not mean that any Talmid Chacham has they used to have these cards where you could get into a lounge in an airport. It's not like a Talmid Chacham has like a lounge card. He swipes and he could use any shul in the world as his personal home because he's a Talmid Chacham. It's specifically this place which you're living in all the time, which becomes literally like your home. Says the Gemara, and it continues. You don't walk into the Beit Knesset in the sunny days because it's too hot. You're going to come in to cool off in the Beit Knesset. Or vice versa in the rain from the rain. The Gemara says, these two rabbis, they were asking a question of Rava and they wanted to know the answer. Suddenly it started pouring. They went inside to the Beit Knesset from the rain. Amri, but they said after they did that, this that we went into the Beit Knesset, why did we do it? Lav mishumitra. We did not go in because of the rain.
They were studying.
Why did you go in then? 2 seconds ago, it wasn't raining, you were outside. Now you came in the rain, you're like, no, it's not because of the rain. What was it cause? Because when a person is studying, you need the concentration and the clarity that's provided, like a day that has a breeze from the north. That breeze, the northerly breeze in Eretz Israel, was a breeze that brought beautiful weather, calm weather. So when there's serenity, a person can study. What the rabbis were saying is, it's true, we came in only when it rained. But we didn't come in because we didn't want to get wet. We were trying to study and understand what the rabbi was saying. It starts pouring rain, you can't focus. So we went into the Beit Knesset because of the rain, but not to get wet, in order to be able to focus on the Torah, because you can't study Torah unless a person's mind is settled.
They went out for a cigarette break, meaning clear their head to feel this northern air?
No, the opposite. They're standing outside, and they're perfectly fine asking him the question outside. All of a sudden it starts pouring rain, now they go inside. So you would have thought they're doing opposite to what we just saw in the Braita. And the Mishnah, you can't walk in to a synagogue for the sun or for the rain to get out of the sun or the rain. And they answered, the reason why we did this was not for the rain. It was for the Torah. But a person can't study unless they're in a state of mind of serenity. So therefore, if I'm trying to study Torah and I'm sitting here and I can't understand because it's raining and I'm looking at my jacket and my pants are getting soaked, I'm not here. So therefore, coming into the Beit Knesset is an extension of clarity in learning as opposed to running away from inclement weather. Okay? Says the Gemara, Amale Rav Acha bered de Rava le Rav Ashi. Rav Acha, the son of Rava, said to Rav Ashi, let's say a person needs to go into the Beit Knesset because they need to go get someone from there. They need to call someone out of the Beit Knesset. But we already said before, you can't go make a shortcut into the Beit Knesset. So what do? What should he do? Amalei, he said, if he's a Torah scholar, let him say a halacha in the Beit Knesset. Okay? And if he's someone who studies Mishnah, but he doesn't yet know halacha. He's not a Talmud or halacha scholar yet, but he knows some Mishnayot. Let him say a Mishnah. V'i le'matnita. V'ikrahu. And if he's someone that only knows how to read Tehillim, a pasuk in the Torah, le'mapsuka. Let him say a pasuk from Tanakh. V'ilo. And if he can't do any of those, lema le'lenuka. They used to have the kitab was in the synagogue. They used to have the kids learning in the synagogue. So pull over a kid and ask the kid, mali psukecha. Tell me what pasuk you learned today. And then, again, they studied, or they heard words of Torah when he came into the synagogue, and that is now why he came in, as opposed to just to make a call to get someone to come out from the synagogue. Inami, what's the other response? And again, maybe the Gemara over here is asking, what if there's no children? The Inami, what should he do? Nishipurta v'nekum. Let him stay for a while, v'nekum, and then get up. If it says v'nekum, then get up, what do you know that he did before he got up? Sat down. So in other words, you don't just sit there like this and then leave. A person, when he goes in and he wants to sit for a few minutes, even if he doesn't know a single pasuk, he doesn't have a kid to rely on, doesn't have anything to do, what should he do? Let him just sit for a few moments. Ashrei yoshvei betecha. The fact that he just sat in the Beit Knesset is also a good thing, and you're not just running through, or you're not just calling the guy. Umaspidim bahem hesped sharabim. The Gemara said earlier, we make a hesped over there for the rabim, for the many. Hechidami hesped derabim. What does it mean, a hesped derabim? What does that entail? Machvi Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda expressed, kegon hesped dekai be Rav Sheshet. Any hesped where Rav Sheshet is at. Machvi Rav Sheshet said, Kegon hesped dekai be Rav Chizda. No, also like a hesped that Rav Chizda is there for. Now, let's take a look for 1 second. Kegon hesped dekai be Rav Sheshet, im yamut adam echad be Rav Sheshet. If someone passes away from the environs, from the crew of Rav Sheshet, so Rav Sheshet and all of his students, everyone would go to that funeral. He was a very well-known rabbi, had a large pooling of of students. Okay, so anything like that would work. Now it's important to understand here that what we're saying here is that let's say that person is not a Talmid Chacham, but everyone is gathering for the sake of the Talmid Chacham. So let's say Rav Sheshet has a family member that's themselves not a Talmid Chacham, okay, regular guy, but because it's Rav Sheshet's son, uncle, nephew, whatever, everyone comes out to the funeral. But what are they coming? They're coming out of respect to Rav Sheshet. So therefore, in this case, each one of them is saying, that this person, this rabbi, if anyone in his environs would that he's a big enough person that would constitute a hesped of rabim. Okay, it doesn't say that they said; it says machvila, which means that they indicated, they pointed. Why did they do that? Because you don't want to say words like that that someone in that person's circle would die. That's not appropriate words to say. So they did it by pointing instead. The Gemara continues.
Let me ask a quick question.
Sure.
A eulogy, does that imply that the body is in the Beit Knesset or no?
Yes. Yes. Rafram aspeda lekalte bebek nishta. Rafram once did a hesped for his daughter-in-law, okay, in the synagogue. Amma mishum, he said, because yikara didi udemeta, because of my honor and the honor of the person that passed away, atu kuli alma, everyone's going to come out. So it's going to be a public eulogy because between me and her, there's going to be a lot of people that are coming. Now, it's important to understand, if it was just her, they wouldn't have come. If it was him, obviously they would have come. But what he's saying when he says, in my honor and in her honor, is a nice way of saying,
For me.
They're going to come to her for me, so therefore it's considered a public eulogy. Rav Zera sapti alehum rabban be'knishta. Rav Zera did a eulogy for a specific Torah scholar, rabbi in the synagogue. Amar, he said, imishum yikara didi, either because of me, imishum yikara didi demita, or because of you, atu kuli alma. Everyone's going to be here. So in other words, here, in this case, the person that he was eulogizing was also a Talmid Chacham, right? So in that case, the halacha...
This is not the daughter-in-law anymore?
Sorry? No. So now we moved on from that. This was Rav Zera. Rafram did it by his daughter-in-law. And there it was really because of him. Right? And if you look carefully, how do we know that? Because the first time it says, Im mishum yikara dide demita didi. Right? Im mishum yikara didi, im mishum yikara dide demita. When Rav Zera said it, he said either me or you. When Rafram said it, he said mishum yikara didi udemita. Me and you. The difference is the and the or. Me or you means either one of us was enough. Me and you really means me. Rafram is saying that, okay? Let's carry on. The Gemara continues. Resh Lakish sabte la'utzur merabanan. Resh Lakish made a hesped for a certain rabbi. This shchiach be'arad Yisrael. This rabbi used to go to Eretz Yisrael all the time. Tahavi tani hilchita b'chav dalet shurata. Okay, and he would teach the halacha. There was 24 rows of students in the room. Okay, Amar, he said, Vai chasra arad Yisrael gavar rabba. Wow, the land of Eretz Yisrael has lost a great person. Why? Because when this rabbi who taught 24 rows of students was now going to his final resting place, he considered that to be a funeral that was the mourning. The mourning belonged to the people of Eretz Yisrael. Okay. Now, there's different opinions. As to how we understand what this means. That there was 24. Either it means that he taught 24 rows of students, which means he was a very big Torah scholar, or it means that he was one of, or maybe even the last of, 24 rows of students, which means that he was a small Torah scholar, but still, Resh Lakish was saying that was considered to be the hesped, the mourning of Eretz Yisrael. Okay, let's continue. Hahu Dahavi Tani. There was this person that was teaching Hilcheta, Sifra, V'Sifri, V'Tosefta. He was teaching the halachot. He was teaching Sifra, Sifri, which are the different midrashim on that cover Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. They cover the laws of the korbanot, the laws of the kohanim. Okay, B'Shachiv, and he passed away. Atu v'amru le'Rav Nachman. They came to Rav Nachman about this massive Torah scholar that he passed away. Lispede mar. They asked him, you should give him a eulogy. Amar hechi nispede. What should I say about him? Right? What could I possibly say? Hey, tzana de mali sifra de chaser. Wow, this unbelievable bag, chalice, bag, vessel that was filled with books, was lost. So you see that Rav Nachman was saying about him that his Torah, that such a tremendous amount of Torah was lost with this person's passing. Okay. However, let's continue. The Gemara says, 1 second. Let's contrast these two things. Tachazi, ma ben takifid arid Israel v'lechasidei Bavel. What's the difference between the Torah scholars? Takifi usually means the ones that are very strong. Of Eretz Israel, the Chasidei Bavel, to the ones that are Chasidim, that are full of righteousness from Bavel. The Gemara says, what are we trying to point out? What's the difference between these two things? So one of them, Resh Lakish said, land of Israel lost a great man. Okay? And Rav Nachman said, we lost this entire basket of Sifarim. So you see Resh Lakish, even though the guy was not necessarily a somebody, he turned it into like a huge deal that he passed away. Now Rav Nachman, when he spoke about this other Talmid Chacham, he says, what do you want me to say? Okay, so this basket of books, passed away. This repository, this container of books. But it wasn't, in the same level of mourning, where Reish Lakish turns it into like a level of national mourning for the entire country of Israel. So you see, there's a difference between the way in Bavel and in Israel they would speak. In Israel they were much tougher, and in Bavel they were much more humble, so to speak, in the way they spoke. Not necessarily in the way that they were much less sharp and more forgiving, let's say. Okay, let's continue. Yeah, let's look at the Rashi just before we go. I just want to point out what Rashi says. Hai tzina, you see it's about right halfway down the page. Hai tzina male safri. Eno ela kesel. The guy he's a simple man. Shemileuhu sefarim. They put a lot of books in him, like a basket. Okay? Ve'en mevin ma betocha, but he doesn't really know what he's saying. He's parroting over these laws. Af shonei halachot, even in the halachot that he's saying over. But he did not spend the time to study with the great Talmidei Chachamim, lilmod, to learn, sheyivonuhu ta'amei mishnah, that they should explain to him all the reasons why the halacha is that way. Sometimes the words of the Mishnah contradict one another. And you have to explain and answer how they are reconciled. Like sometimes we found the Gemara says, what are we dealing with in this case? And in such a case, if who is this opinion? This opinion is Rabbi, but this guy doesn't really know. So you see that Rav Nachman, he didn't know what to say, but he wanted to be complimentary, but not necessarily overstate what the person was. So he said, wow, look at how full of books he was. Okay? Whereas Reish Lakish was much more effusive, saying how it's a mourning for Israel. This idea is actually, there's an even sharper term that gets thrown around. They say about a person, chamor noseh sfarim, like a donkey carrying books. Like the guy's able to say a lot of different things, but doesn't necessarily mean he understands what it is that he's actually saying. Okay? Now, one of the interesting things that's coming out of this is, what does it cost Rav Nachman to be a little nicer at the guy's funeral? Nothing. So why is he doing that? So it's actually interesting. If you open up a Sidur, you'll see that there's a special hashkava for Talmidei Chachamim and a regular hashkava for regular people. Okay? And the Sifrei Kabbalah say, you should not say the hashkava for a Talmid Chacham for a regular guy. Why? Because once the person passed away and they're in the world of truth, to hear you say false flattery about the person brings the neshama tremendous embarrassment and pain. Imagine, as an example, everybody here knows a guy is, a guy gets by. He's not a rich guy, not a poor guy. Middle of the road guy, he buys a used car, he has the same suit for 5-10 years. Regular guy. He's living, he's not, and everybody knows it. And you say, this guy was a man of unbelievable wealth. If you say, this guy, he makes a respectable living, the guy's happy to be called a spade a spade. But you start talking about superlatives and things, it causes the neshama, because the neshama knows, and everyone around the neshama and shamayim also knows, and it turns into like a roast. This guy, wow, no bigger Talmid Chacham than him. So they say that a person, and I've sometimes been to funerals where the rabbi will say something, and you see the family like sniggering to each other. This man, I remember one specifically, rabbi got up and he said, this man loved shul. He loved to go to shul, loved to be in shul. And the family is like, what shul? Right? I hated shul, So if the family is sniggering, could you imagine, right? Not only that, the Chachamim say, the Zohar says, that it could cause even more pain to the soul, because when people talk that way, then in Shamayim they want to know, oh, that's who they think you were? How come you weren't that? They're judging you based on the high standard that people think, because you obviously hid, who you really are from everybody else. So that can be very damaging for a person. So therefore Rav Nachman wanted to be very precise in his language. Okay, let's just finish this and then we'll end for today. The Gemara continues and it says, Tanan Atam, we learned, Udi ishtamesh b'taga chalaf. Where do we learn that? Pirkei Avot. Person who uses the crown of Torah, chalaf, he passes from this world. So to use the crown of Torah for your own personal honor is chalaf. Tani Resh Lakish taught, Zeh mishtamesh b'mi sheshoneh halachot. This is referring to Kitra shel Torah. What does that mean? That he uses this person. What does it mean that he uses this person? Hamishtamesh mishoneh halachot Kitra shel Torah. That means that a person who he knows very little, he's saying over halachot because he heard this, he heard that. Doesn't really know what he's saying. Someone told him this is a halakha. He said over the halakha. But now he makes it look like he's a big rabbi, and he's using the crown of Torah, but he doesn't really know it. Okay, for his honor, that already is considered this idea of the ishtamesh bitaga chalaf. Okay, now there's a very interesting story of exactly this idea that was said specifically with Rabbi Tarfon. Okay, tells us about the fact that Rabbi Tarfon had a situation where he was put in a sack, and the guy, he was trying to steal money from him, and he was going to throw him in the river, to get away from him. And he puts Rabbi Tarfon in the sack. He starts dragging him to the river, and Rabbi Tarfon realizes that the guy, he might die in the river. So he starts saying out loud to himself, Tarfon, Tarfon, like, what's going to be with you? Like, Yani, let the guy know that he just threw a rabbi in a sack. The guy hears the big rabbi is the person he tried to steal from. He's so scared, he's so embarrassed, he drops the sack and runs away. The Chachamim tells Rabbi Tarfon emerged from the sack, crying and mourning over the fact, the ishtamesh betaga chalaf, that he had used the crown of Torah because he didn't say, oh, the police are coming. He said, it's you, Tarfon. And now the guy respected him because of his Torah. So he was using the Torah for his own benefit, for his own personal usage, and he was very upset about that. We'll carry on with this in this vein, Be'ezrat Hashem, next time.